Okay, and we're COMP3025, week 5, lesson 5, part 2, right? In our slightly disabled state, we will continue. Let us continue like this. Okay, so we've got this hello, and you know what? Let's make this hello go all the way, stretch all the way across. I'm just going to get rid of this for a second. I'm going to click this, get back into my storyboard view, right? And I'm just going to work with my storyboard with no, with no other kind of, no other programmatic anything, right? So I'm going to reset to suggested constraints, takes away the orange lines, which are bad, and it goes back to blue lines, which are good. Blue lines good, orange bad, okay? Just remember that, and you'll be good. You'll be fine, right? This is the quick and dirty way to do constraints. You can do them manually as well with these other two buttons down here, right? But you don't need to do that right now. Okay, cool. So I've got this thing. I'm going to bring back my inspector, and I'm going to drag and drop some other kinds of things here. Like, for example, this switch. Okay, now remember, the switch can be an outlet, and it can also be an IBE action. You can do both things, right? When I click the switch, it can be an action of a kind. And when I can also I can use it as an outlet. Let's make this switch do both things. Switch on and off when I tell it to, and when I switch it on, it does something to the label. Huh? What do you think? Let's try that. So again, I get rid of this screen. I bring up my assistant editor. Of course, it gives me my view controller, which is the link, right? And now here is my my switch, and I want to use this first as an outlet, right? So not as an action, but as an outlet. So I do control click, and I just bring it underneath the other one. And I'm going to just call this whatever I want. This is your name that you give the outlet. So I'm going to give this a switch. Let's say I'll call this green switch, right? And I won't call it an outlet. I'll just call it a green switch, right? So we know what it is. And I click connect. There's my green switch, right? Okay, well, when I click my button, not only will this thing go hello, all right, but inside my click me button action, I want this green switch for something to happen to it. So if I start typing green switch and dot, whoa, I got all this other stuff I can do, right? I can say, did change value for key? No, did change. I can scroll down, enabled or disabled. That just makes it that I can do something with it. Right, finalize frame, hash highlighted, input, and if I go down to set, way down here, I can also start typing if I think it's set. Way down on the bottom, remove, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just going to show you there's so many of them. Okay, here we go. Set needs display, set content compression, no, set needs, how do I do this thing? I don't know. Oh, that's right, baby. Set on, right? And you know what? I'm going to say set on as a Boolean, right, is going to be false. That's right, baby. And you know what? My animated as a Boolean, right, I'm also going to say false because, that's the kind of false Boolean kind of God that I am, right? I'm a false God. Right? All right, I'm going to save this thing, and then I'm going to run it just like this. And let's see if it does what I tell it to do, right? So I click on it, I click this, oh, it turns off too. Huh? What do you think? So now my switch is an outlet, right? I'm also going to make it an action, right? I'm also going to make it an action, which means if I switch this on like this, it's also going to do something. Let's do that now. Let's do that piece. Because remember, any control that you drag and drop into your view, into your storyboard, can be both an outlet and an action. Right? Within reason. Okay, so let me do, now if I'm going to create a control, I'm going to create a new event handler, right? Because it's an IBE action. So I'm going to control click underneath the other one. Here it is, right? And now I'm going to change this to action, right? And of course, I'm going to name this green switch action, right? Or something else that's different than the other thing I called it, right? Again, it says my event is value changed. That's the value changed event. I can look up for other kinds of events like touch up inside, but that touch up inside makes no sense for this kind of control because we want to wait for it, we want to listen for it to be changed, right? That's the correct event, and it'll default, it's intuitive enough to know that it's that value changed event that we're looking for. Connect. Here's my green switch action. It does that, and now of course when I click it, I want to go to my hello label outlet. And I'm going to go to my text value and change it back to hello. right? So now it's both an outlet and an action. Okay, let me try this out. Clickety click, and if I've done this correctly, and if I click me, okay, it turns off, it goes goodbye, and if I switch it this way, it goes back to hello. Yeah, outlet and action, and both in one control, right? And let me talk about another couple things here. I'm going to get rid of the assistant editor for a second, and let's go over here to the right side where we see some of these extra controls. Well, there's a little arrow key right here. See this little arrow key? This little arrow key, if I click on a control like hello, right? Here's my hello control, right? Which is a label. If I click this little arrow key, it gives me the, if it's an outlet, any kind of reference outlets or actions that it does. Okay, if you notice, that's there. If I want to, what if I click this X? What will it do, this bad thing, right? Well, it'll disconnect it, won't it, right? And how do we know it's disconnected? If I go back to the assistant editor, and this is the thing, you'll see this open circle. That's bad, right? Open circle, bad, right? Closed circle with a plus, good, right? That's what I want you to remember when it comes to any connections. How do I reconnect it? Well, it's as simple as control clicking like this. Control clicking this thing and back into the circle, right? And you say, well, hey, it's not, I don't understand. How come it's not, well, because you'd have to create another outlet. You can do another outlet for it like this. So I'm actually clicking on the right thing, yes. I'm not clicking on the right thing. No, I meant this one. See how simple that is? And if I do this, it's going to ask me, do I want to create another outlet or action and stuff? Because this outlet and action, this one right here, means nothing if I do it this way again. How about if I go back the other way? If I go like this and kind of point to this thing here, does that connect? And yes, it does, right? So you can wire it up both ways. I can create an IBE outlet or IBE action programmatically and then pull my wire towards the control that I want, right? So lots of flexibility in terms of doing that. We just have to get the terminology. IBE action, interface builder action, means event handler. And IBE outlet is almost like this is what's going to be affected. We're going to make a reference, almost like we're going to register a reference for the objects that we're going to try to affect, right? So when we create a reference, these are the reference objects right here, right? So if I was going to make some kind of comment up here, I could say something like IBE Outlets, right? And I want to put them all there, and I want to kind of give me a little bit of comments, right? There's my IBE Outlets. Here are a couple of, if I want to be nice, IBE Actions, right? I'm going to use some comments. This is the normal way of commenting with C, influence language style, right? And then we have a couple of extra things, like this ViewDidLoad override method. Well, this ViewDidLoad override method comes with every view controller class, right? And we need it. It's not something that we can get rid of. However, this one did receive memory warning. We can just go plop plop and see you later. Right? We don't need that one because we didn't receive any memory warning. We don't care about memory warnings right now. Okay? You can't even run your darn program, never mind memory warnings, right? So we don't need that one. And if I run it just like this, right? If I run it, it'll still run because build succeeded because I don't need that memory warning thing, right? But what does this ViewDidLoad do? What is this thing that happens here? Well, this is what happens when my view, let me talk about what the view is for a second. I'm going to take away my assistant editor, go back to my standard editor. I'm going to bring back this pane over here on the left-hand side. And if you notice this little button down here is the outliner. This is the outliner. And this shows me the outline, and you'll be familiar with this, very similar to what Android does, with all of the layouts that's happening right now. And if you notice, inside of my main view, I have a hello, a click me, a switch, and some constraints, right? Leave the constraints alone, but you can always, even if you mess them up, you can always go back and fix it, like I showed you with that automatic fixer, right? But we'll do it manually later on. Okay, so this is where the view sits. The view is what's happening. And when this view loads, it clicks or fires this event over here. I'm just going to bring that manager back for a second. So I'm going to get rid of this and click away from this outliner and bring back my assistant editor. And my ViewDidLoad means that when this view loads, you can do something. It's an event handler, right? So what about if my view loads, I want to modify my hello label outlet, right? I can change my text and I want to change my text to my view loaded, right? Something like that. Can I do that? And let's see what happens when I do that kind of thing, when I run my program, right? I run my program, clickety-click, my view loaded, and of course if I click me, it goes goodbye, and if I go like this, it goes hello, right? Because remember, my view did load is one of our main method override methods that we have to override. We must override the view did load. If I take it out, you know, you're going to get a build error, okay? Because your view controller needs to do something, right? Questions around this? Controls can be, again, summary. Controls can be IBE actions, can have them, and they also can be outlets. So both can be receivers and takers of information, right? Or givers and receivers. I mean, they're both ways, in that way, right? And we're sending messages, right? We're sending messages with our controls. When I click my control, if I click into my control, if I change my control, if I move my control, if I drag my control, I'm creating an event. Whether I listen to it or not is all around, did I create an IBE action for that kind of event? Did I specify what type of action am I creating? And fine, I did that. Now, what am I going to do with it, with the information? Right? What am I doing this information for? Okay, well, how about debugging? We did some of this kind of stuff, right, with ViewDidLoad. But you know what? I want to not only put it here, my view loaded, right? Let's not put it here because I don't want to change my text label. What about if I want to print to the console? Because I think printing to console is a good way of debugging for us developer types, right? So I'm going to go print line. Remember print line? It existed back in the day in other program languages. I'm going to kind of cut this, and I'm going to kind of, put this back inside here and close it up. I need to use parentheses for print line, unfortunately. I can't leave just the quotation marks when I use print line because print line is a method. It's a method call, right? So I'm going to run this thing again, and when my view did load, right, on the bottom here, I get my view loaded. This is what my console looks like down here, right? My view loaded, right? My view loaded. And when we talk about the event lifecycle of our code, of our program, right? We have our interface. And the interface has a life cycle, if you will. It kind of loads, it unloads, it does all kinds of stuff. But where are all those things? Because there's another Swift Swift program or connector that we haven't talked about yet. We've talked about the view controller because remember, going back to what we said in the first time we met, Apple uses this whole model view controller methodology or pattern, right? So far we've seen the view controller. There's no model because we don't have any data that we're linking to, right? So there is no data. We're not using core data. We're not storing things in a file somewhere, somehow on the machine, on the actual device, right? And so from that perspective, we don't need a model. Right now we're using view controllers to mess with the view and the storyboard. That's all we're doing here, okay? So I'm going to get rid of the bottom part because I don't need to see this piece here. And I'm going to get rid of my assistant editor and go back to standard editor. I'm going to also bring back the left pane over here where this is my project view. By the way, there's different options here that you can see different views up here as well. Like for example, I can look at the symbol navigator and I can search for different things here in my code and so on. For now, we just want to look at the actual project navigator. Okay, so here I've got my storyboard. I've got my view controller, which I can also look like this. I can see this way by using my view controller window here. I can program just simply in here. I also have this other thing called AppDelegate.swift. AppDelegate. And what I want you to think about AppDelegates as, okay, when you hear the word AppDelegate or a delegate, right? It's a really confusing word that Apple uses. They're like, let's make a delegate, right? And you're like, what the hell is a delegate? That doesn't make any sense, right, to me. It's not intuitive, the word delegate. What I'm really talking about, comparing to other languages, for us object-oriented programming types, right, is it's an interface. That's what it is. And what's the truth about interfaces, right? They create the shape for our classes. That's all they do. They create a shape for our classes. They're almost like an abstract, they create abstract methods that they define. We could define the method, but we don't implement the method. There's no implementation. There's no code block for the method, just like abstract classes. And then we have to override these methods that are inside of our that when we implement this interface. So when we see this interface, UI application delegate, that is an interface that we want to implement alongside the UI responder class, the superclass that we're getting. Okay, this is our AppDelegate class, and it's of different types. It takes in this UI responder class as well as this UI application delegate interface. Delegates mean interfaces. Okay. If you ever look online and say, what the hell is Tom talking about, an interface? And if you don't remember things from Java, who did Java interfaces? Please tell me you have.
I think we did.
I think all of you have done interfaces. You should have done interfaces with at least Java for sure. Some people may have not, right? If you, or maybe it was glossed over, depending on the class you're in. Think about them as almost like you create a shape or a blueprint for certain methods that you want to include in your class, right? And it forces users like us to use those methods so that we don't mess anything up from a connection perspective. That's what it does, right? From a code hinting perspective, it helps us say, hey, you're missing this. Well, these are all the pieces of our app delegate. Look what it says here. Func application, our method, our application, and it says we're implementing a couple things here. Did finish launching with options. Okay. Here's our application will resign active. Okay, let's make a couple of print line statements to understand what's going on from a control flow perspective. So I'm going to say print line. I'm in the AppDelegate.swift file now, right? And inside my print line, I'm going to say, you know what? We're in the AppDelegate, right? AppDelegate, and we're going to do will resign active. That's what we're doing. We're in that particular method, all right? And you know what? I like this. I'm going to do this again for the application did enter the background. Okay, when does the application enter the background? And it tells you, it gives you some hits. It says use this method to release shared resources and save user data when you click that home button. So when I click the home button in my application, when I'm using my iPhone, and I'm working in an application here on my iPhone, and I click the home button, and my application switches to the background, this method fires. So if I want to take away, I want to put it away in the background so it doesn't take up memory resources and battery power, this is what happens when this method fires. So let's say when this method fires, we're going to check this out. We'll say did enter background. Let's just do them all. Did enter background. And here we're going to say will enter foreground because it went from a background to foreground. It's going to fire just before it enters the foreground, right? This is part of our user interface lifecycle, if you will, right? Will enter foreground. Okay, and we're going to copy it in here as well. Why not? Here is did become active. So my application became active. So this talks about application settings, right? Did become active. And this one more, will terminate. That's a difficult one. That only happens when my application caused an error and it's going to terminate, right? Or if we want to terminate it manually, will terminate. Okay, cool. Let's try that out. So it's going to do all this when the application launches. Let's see what happens on launch now. Okay, so I launch it, and let's watch my view loaded. AppDelegate did become active. So did become active happened once, right? That happened once. If I press Command H, let's go back. If I press Shift Command H, right, it takes me back. Look what happens to my application. I'm going to bring this up here so you guys can see this. My view loaded. My application did become active. My application will resign active. So we kind of hit that one, that triggered that one, and did enter the background. Okay, cool. We'll bring back my application. There it is. And let's say, how do I kill my application? Well, remember, if I do a double tap with my, for those people who are non-iOS users, you have to double tap the actual the home button to actually bring up almost like a where I can force quit my application. Okay, so if I double tap, it brings up the application. There it is, right? And if I do this and swipe up, then I launch my application, and of course I get this really weird error that says, hey, it's gone, right? Now it should have said will resign or whatever, or will terminate, right? Cool. I'm back to this. If you notice, there's an error that comes up because my application is gone. If I launch my application again, right, by double tapping it, I should be able to do that with my thing, then it should launch. If not, we have a bit of an error. That's okay. because none of you can do it anyway. All right, so there we go. And if you notice, look what it says here on the left. This is very interesting. It's bringing me my memory usage right now, right? It's giving my disk usage, my network usage, but my memory usage is like 18.3 megs for this application. I've got this clicked, right? So I can actually do a little bit of testing for my memory, and it's actually testing my memory to see how much I'm using by clicking this button. If I go back to here, back to this, right?
For iOS users, only 1 gig of RAM. That's a lot.
I'm just saying. So again, I've kind of, when it hits some of these things, did enter background, will enter foreground. Let's try that one more time to see how it fires. So I'm going to close down my simulator for a second. I think it's important for us to understand the life cycle of our application, because when we understand what happens when it loads, we can respond to those events. That's why I'm showing you these things. Okay? So I'm going to fire this off again. I'm going to make it work. Here I go. Okay, my application runs. My simulator is on. And then, of course, on my console, I get ViewDidLoad, and my application, my AppDelegate did become active. I click a couple of things here, it does some stuff, and if I double tap my H, or tap my H, it resigns active and did enter background, and if I tap it again, it will enter foreground and did become active, comes back, right? So it basically, these things fire in and out to tell us that the application is doing stuff, right? We need to know these things because once we hear these events firing, then I can go and respond to these types of events, right, if I need to. So if I know my application comes back up, maybe what I want to do is reset things when the user brings my application back up, right? Maybe I want to save my state somewhere, like in a data file or in a NoSQL database somewhere, right? And I want to bring it back in, right, when my application loads. But I don't care about having all that data loaded to kill my battery while my application's in the background. So what can I do when my application's in the background, right? My application in the background, you might think, well, maybe I can make my application run while it's in the background. Apple doesn't really allow that kind of stuff to happen so much, right? Let's take a look at what it allows you to do when it's in the background. If I say and click capabilities, right? So here I'm in my manifest area. I'm clicking on my project itself. And right now I'm clicked on general. If I go capabilities, it brings me back all these capabilities that I can turn on or off from my application. For example, in-app purchases, Apple Pay, personal VPN, maps, and so on. All these things that I can click on, right? These are the things that I can connect to. There's also background modes, and if I click on background modes, it'll show me what, if I turn this on to background modes, it'll tell me which ones are allowed. These are only the ones that are allowed for background modes. I can play some music in the background. I can use my Bluetooth in the background. I can act as a Bluetooth. I can do a background fetch, but very limited things because Apple doesn't want you to do too many things in the background. It'll eat your battery, right? Okay, so that's it. Let's go back to the application itself. So I'm going to go back here, hit General. And again, these other tabs tell us, this is a bit of a, we talked about this in the beginning, but this is almost like our manifest, our plist. Our build settings, we can modify these as well in terms of how we link to different libraries, how we package things together, and so on. And we can also specify a complete build for how we build and everything else. And we can specify build rules, which is kind of an advanced way of doing things. But for now, all we need to worry about is, in our course right now, is general, right? And these are the three things we've got going on here with our AppDelegate, view controller, and main storyboard. We looked at image.xc assets, which is where we put all of our assets. And that's all of our images like we talked about last week, right? So if you want to put your assets, whatever, you drag and drop them into here. You can do it that way. And there's the other way we talked about last week, which is clicking on image assets or image catalog. But here we notice there is an app icon, which there's no app icon. We have to specify one if we want to, and we can create an image set by clicking and drag and dropping different app icons in here. Phew. And then, of course, the launch screen, one more thing to notice is the launch screen has some basic styling, which you could definitely replace with your own style when your app temporarily launches and is loading up its resources. Okay, cool. So are we clear on this? AppDelegate is really all about your application, right? AppDelegate takes the interface, your delegate interface, as well as your application, class, and this is the thing that creates your application, right? And then your view controller, you need one or more view controllers in your application, and each view controller should be tied to a different storyboard, right? Right now we only have one storyboard, but if we have multiple storyboards, we can create that, and we need multiple view controllers usually to control different storyboards. And you can also use your own custom classes in here as well. If you wanted to set up a custom class for something, that you wanted to do something, any kind of custom class you can think about, yeah.
How do we pass information between storyboards or view controllers?
Again, what you want to try and do is, you're part of the same namespace. So once we create our second view controller, what we want to do is we want to link, we'll actually do another wire between one storyboard and another. That's really cool, right? But again, we'll talk about that as we get into a multi-view layout. When we have, let's say, our entry view, like kind of a navigation. And actually, if you wanted to check that out right now, because we're just doing this little demo, let's do that. Let's take a look at another kind of application. I'm going to just close this down. That was our first demo. And I'm also going to close down my simulator for now. I'm going to open up another type of demo. So I'm going to go File, New, Project. So let's do the second demo. Let's click Master Detail Application. Let's click that one. Okay? So we can see these different application types as well. So when you're going to see these as we go forward anyway, let's do it. All right, so I'll go next. And again, I'm going to make a universal app. I'm going to call this second demo. Second demo. And we're going to click next. Right? And we're going to click put it in the same spot. Yeah. Master detail application. Master detail application. Okay. Now we have a bit of a different view, don't we? Take a look at this. I've got my master view detail, my detail view controller, and my main storyboard. Okay, let me just kind of zap out here, right? So now you have this situation, right? Where you have here's my master table view, right? My table view. I've got my navigator. This is where, see this little arrow here? This indicates where I start. Okay, this little arrow. So this is where I start off. And if you look on the right-hand side, I'm just going to go into this piece here. It basically tells you I can get application details of where I start. If I run this thing the way it is, just the way it is, I'm going to get some basic functionality, right? So if you notice, I can do something like this. I can add this. If I click this, it'll take me across to my other view, my detail view. That's my detail view. And I can also go back automatically, right? I can add as many of these as I want. These are just timestamps. And I can also, it also includes a lot of this built-in functionality. So I can go to this one, and I can go to this one, right? These are the detail views. So again, this is multi-page applications with my master detail view application template. Okay, so really, really cool. And in here, if you notice, I've got my couple of view controllers now, don't I? I've got my master view controller, right? And I'm still inheriting from UIKit. And instead of a regular UI view controller, I'm getting this UI table view controller because I have a table view, right? It's a different kind of table view. We can create that on our own as well, right? And also, I've got my detail view controller. My detail view controller is just a regular UI controller, UI view controller. And the UI view controller is the class, the UI view class, view controller class, that we're inheriting for all of our view controllers. That's what it's called, UI view controller. UI being user interface, view controller is the document that we're going to link to our storyboard. Okay? And now we have multiple storyboards, right? I just want to give you a view of this. We're not going to do too much here, but I wanted to give you a view of what it would look like, kind of a preview of what it would look like. And these things here, these connectors here, and here, and here, are segues. That's what they are. So if I look at this segue from our master view control, this is our table view, to our detail view, right? This is where it goes to our detail view, right? And it goes through our navigation control. There's two navigation controllers here, this one and this one, right? I can actually choose, if I click on the segue, right, as an example, I can choose, depending on the segue that I'm choosing, like this one, I can choose the type of segue, like show detail. I can also choose, you know, some kind of rollover, like a, which one looks really, really interesting? Not a modal, there's a push, and there's also a curl. I wanted to show you guys a curl, what that looks like.
You want to be using deprecated segues?
I could, but no, typically we want to use the ones up here. Like for example, as a popover, right? I can present this as a popover, and I can choose a different kind of segue. So let's run that now as a popover, build failed, because of course you can't be a popover. I have to choose what I'm popping over. It doesn't make any sense. So if I go back to what it is, which is show detail, and I try and build it. And by the way, if you press Command B for build to just test your build, you can see if it build or succeeded. Command R runs the application, and it shows us back to what we had before. But if you notice, all these things I added in here, they're gone. Once I close my application down, right? I've closed it down and I run it again, right? I don't store anything here because I'm not using data. This is not a model view controller. I'm just doing a view controller, and I'm keeping some data in the system as I'm working with it, but it goes away unless I store it somewhere. And I need to do that with some kind of core data implementation. So we looked at a couple of different projects. One of them is this multi-view project, and here I've got the wrong thing clicked. If you click different segues, they give you the ability. See, this is a segue between my master view controller and my navigation control, right? And I can simply create other segues. If I wanted to do this myself, right? So instead of using this demo application, right, I want to make my own storyboard. So if I want to create my own storyboard, and I want to make my own view controller from scratch, right? Because we're going to need to do that one day too. It's not a difficult thing to do. Let's try that one as well. So this is our kind of second demo. And again, you do the same thing. You can add details to this master table view, if you will. But we're going to make our own now. Let's try that. So I'm going to go close this one off. I'm going to quit Xcode. Right, here we go. And I'm going to launch it again with my new launch Xcode. I didn't mean to do that. Launch Xcode with a new project type. And this time I'm going to go back to that single view application, right? And I'm going to call this third demo. I'm going to keep the other one. That first demo, keep that because I want you to remember what you did there. And when I create this third demo in here, now what if I was to add additional view controllers in here or additional storyboards? Well, how would I do that? Well, if you notice down here, it's not just about adding, here's my main storyboard. It's not just about adding view control. I don't have to just use items like labels and buttons and all that kind of stuff. I can also add other things in here, right? So take a look. What other things can I add in here? A tab bar controller, a table view controller, a navigation controller. And if I add this navigation controller, it adds a nav bar, interestingly enough, to my application. So I can just drag and drop this in here, and I can put this wherever I want. Now, for me to do that, see how it zooms in here? The best way to do that would be to go to 50%, like I showed you, or 25%. Let's go to 25% for a second so you can see it. If once I drag and drop my controller in here, automatically what happens is I have these links occurred in my application. Let me go back to 50% so you can see what I'm talking about here. It automatically, when I drag and drop my navigation controller, I've got a nav bar, right? This is where my navigation controller starts. I've got this table view controller that goes ahead of my my regular view controller window. And if I drag and drop some other stuff in there to show you how it works, like a button, I can't do that, by the way, in this view. I got to go to 100% because it's not, that view is the wrong view. So I drag and drop it in here somewhere. Let's go in the middle of my screen using the guides, Apple's guides, right? Right to the middle would be right where it kind of gives me those two blue guides right there. That's the exact middle of my screen. That's very, very cool. And if I run this application the same way right now, right, what is it going to show me? It's going to show me, take me right to here, right? Because I have nothing, I don't have a view controller for my my master detail view. I don't have a view controller. I have to create my own, right? And I do that by actually going here, and I can say File, New, right? And I can create a new type of file. The new type of file, it will come up with different kinds of files here. For example, I can come up with a new Swift file, which is what I want to do. I'm going to go click Next. Oh wait, I'm wrong one. iOS Swift file. This is Cocoa OS 10. I don't want to choose the wrong one here. So a Swift file, that's going to be my iOS application. Click Next. Okay, and then I can call it whatever I want. And I obviously want to call it something to do with view controller, like, master detail view controller, right? And I'm going to create it. What this does is it creates a space for my application. It's still inside of my third demo. I can put it wherever I want, see it wherever I want, organize it the way I want. But right now, all it does is it imports Foundation. Foundation is the basic framework for what I kind of base everything else out of. Now, I don't need that. If I look at my view controller as an example, here's my view controller. I don't need that. I just need UIKit. So I can get rid of Foundation, and I can import UIKit just like I normally do, right? And this is from scratch, right? So now I'm going to create the same kind of layout as this. I'm going to kind of create my UI view controller, but I'm going to create a special UI view controller. And my special UI view controller is going to be of type a detail view or a table view controller, right? Because that's what it is. My class is going to be called master detail view controller. That's my class, right? That's what this is going to be called. And I usually want to keep it the same as everything else. I'm just going to say class, right? And if you notice, I can say master detail view controller, right? And it's of type, right? UI table view controller. And if I look down, I can just kind of strict down and it'll give me the type that I have here. And automatically, when I do that, it's going to ask me to implement my methods. If things are included, I have to implement certain methods for this UI table view controller to work, so to speak. Make sense? In here, if you notice, ViewDidLoad works. It can work independently for each table view controller is just a view controller with specialization. It's a subclass of view controller, the view controller superclass. So therefore, it has ViewDidLoad. So if I type ViewDidLoad in here, right, and I need to type an override just like I have in here, right? So it says override func ViewDidLoad. Let's try that. Override, right? 2 R's. Func. And I start typing ViewDidLoad. Anything that's part of my UI table view controller will appear as something that I can automatically generate, right? So let's do the ViewDidLoad method, and automatically give me a method stub for ViewDidLoad and anything I want to kind of pass in here. Now it's gonna make some suggestions. If I actually click on one of these things, it says I expect an expression. I can't just have nothing, no code in here, right? So I could just wipe this out and put something like kind of a print line statement that says my view loaded, right? But I'm still getting an error. How come?
Override func.
That's right. Because once I started putting my override in there, I overrode it twice. I didn't have to do that, right? So I've got my master detail view controller, but it doesn't really do anything yet. I've created my basic class, right? And look what it says here, master detail view controller.swift, which is just another Swift class. You okay, Jean-Luc? Am I killing you yet?
It's okay. It's been a long day.
Sorry, Matt. So again, if you notice, I need this class because I need to kind of tell when my view did load. And this now is not wired to anything. If you notice the gutter, there's nothing in here. And I've got a couple of warnings. It says, if I go to my main storyboard, right, here's my main storyboard. I've got a couple of issues here, right? It says, if I click on any one of these things, if you notice, there's a couple of connections. There's my root view controller. This is my first responder. We'll talk about what first responder is in a bit. And this exit, how my application exits, right? Any one of these has the same thing, right? Well, I want to link my master detail view controller. I want to link it somehow to my view controller, right? This view controller here, this master view controller, which was way over here. This one, which is my table view controller, right? So if I want to take this and I want to control it, I can't control click anymore. So when I control click, it does weird, funny things, right? Take a look. So control clicking does show and finder, all that stuff. So, but I want to link this up. I want to kind of connect this one to this one. Well, let's do the same thing we did last time, right? So because we don't have a connector right now for our root view controller, right? I can't drag and drop this thing. So I could try and do one of these. You'd think that maybe I could do something like this if I control click, but I can't. I have to be able to basically do the same thing I did last time by bringing up my my view, right? So this is my view, and if you notice, it says, here's my UI table view controller.h. This is my basic UI view controller, right? This is my class, my UI view controller class. So it's a .h file, if you notice, right? C++, C. I don't want this one, right? This is my automatic. I want to choose whichever view controller I want, right? And right now, I can't choose which one I bring up unless I choose manual, like this, Master Detail View Controller Swift, right? And now, if I want to say that this is somehow linked to this, right? I want to be able to kind of take this, control-click it, and connect it to my file, and I can't do that at this stage. But we'll get into that later on. The idea here is that you have multiple view controllers, and you want to be able to link a view controller .swift file to each storyboard, right? And each storyboard is going to have its own file, right? Now, I don't have to. If I want to, for example, to make this storyboard link, if I want to kind of click this prototype cell, and I want to drag and drop this prototype cell so that it kind of connects with this, as long as I have a connector, and I can do that, by the way, by getting rid of this window, and bring up my right window here. And when I click on this controller, go back to here, and I can see that I don't have any triggered segues, I don't have any outlets, I don't have any collections, I don't have any connections whatsoever. That's what this is showing me right here, right? And if you notice, what I want to have is I have a table view, but I don't have any kind of reference for a connection to my view controller object, right? Okay, I don't have that. And if you notice, there's a bunch of other things that I can go here as well, but nothing is showing here as a way for me to connect. Okay. Even if I drag and drop, because I haven't connected my view controller object to my storyboard, I cannot create an IB action or IB outlet. Going back to my previous example, I'm just going to close this one down, right? I'm just going to close this whole project down and go back to my other project that I had, right? So here's my first demo that I went to before. Here's my first demo, right? And remember this one, we have our main storyboard here, and I have this, if I click this up here, this view controller, right? And if I click on the right-hand side here, and I click on my my recognizers, so my outlets, here's my gesture recognizers. Do I have any? No. Right? But take a look at all this. My segues, my outlets, all these different things I have here is my received actions. It actually gives you a kind of a top-down view of all the stuff that I've got. Here's my view, right on the left-hand side, all that stuff. And we will build our own view controller object, like our Swift file, as well as our own storyboard, and link it with a segue, right? Link it with the segue to our other objects. And if I wanted to do that here without a view controller, let me try that out, without breaking anything. Bear with me, guys, and we'll go into the actual PowerPoint a little bit after a little break again, because I think we all need one, right? Sorry, I'm just going to space. Was that? You're hungry?
Timmy closes in 15 minutes.
So this is, oh, we need to go on break so we can get Timmy's. That's just that's a must, right? Again, if you look on the right here, there's different kinds of, if I say view controller, right? Here is where I can actually kind of drag and drop my view controller window. If I go to 50%, here, I've got two view controllers, one over the other one. And what I could do is I could kind of click this view controller, and if I control click from here to there, I can create a segue. I can kind of say, what kind of segue do I want? A show detail, a show, a present modally. Let's do a show segue, and then I got a connection, right? So I can connect one view controller to the other, but I can't get to that segue unless I have a button that takes me to the other view controller. I can just show one and hide the other, right? And we're going to get to that eventually. Let's take a brief break and get some coffee.